Okay, everybody, next we have Jeremy Taylor.
Well, good evening. Brett mentioned family, and I was listening to Representative Will speak, and I kept hearing these kids that were yelling in the background, and I thought, whose kids would those be that would be yelling? And of course I looked over and they were mine. So apologize for that, but I love that we have our families here. I love that Juliana spoke for Zach, and I love that we fight and we serve on behalf of our families and our nation. So I want to just speak to you a little bit from the heart tonight and talk to you about my journey in public service. And it really began by what my parents taught me. They were both school teachers, and Dad worked incredibly hard painting houses after school in order to afford us an opportunity. Because you see, he was the first in his family line to ever have graduated high school and gone on to college. And he wanted us to have an opportunity that his dad had never had. He knew that upward mobility and a free republic was predicated on hard work and education. And so he also taught me this, along with my mom, that no matter what you're doing in life, that there's always time to serve. And so he served in the National Guard. He served as the director of the Special Olympics. Mom served in Sunday school, teaching kids what a life transformed by Christ was like. So I followed in their footsteps, and I went on a mission to teach in Vietnam at a university. And on that Christian mission, I met my wife, Kim, who's with us tonight. She's waving at us. And I fell in love over there. And she came here legally, immigrating. And it let me realize just the value of what our country offers and promises to people. I followed in my parents' footsteps as a high school English teacher, but I saw something in my students that was lacking, and that was that same appreciation by which so many people from other countries want the freedoms that we have and seek that opportunity to be in this city on a hill. And so I thought, what could inspire my students? And so some other teachers and I found what it could be. And we brought in World War II veterans, and they talked about their service. They talked about their sacrifice in places like Japan and in Germany and in standing in the gap. And you know, they inspired my students, but they inspired me as well. So at the age of 29, I enlisted in the Army. And I was going deeper in my faith than I ever had, because I was away from my wife and my 2 kids, with one on the way at the time. And I went deep in my faith, and I also met some chaplains that helped me along the way. And so by the end of my time, I answered to even higher call, and that was to become a chaplain myself. And so today I serve in the Iowa Army National Guard. I just promoted a major last month, and I bring soldiers to God and God to soldiers, to nurture the living, care and comfort the wounded, and honor the dead. It's about service and it's about sacrifice. So I feel called in this race to serve for such a time as this and to stand in the gap. And so I have been in the Iowa House where I served, and I had an A ranking from the American Conservative Union. You'll see that's a difference in some of our records in this race. An A ranking from the NRA. I was a friend of ag from the Farm Bureau, and I floor managed 6 pieces of legislation which are law today that affect veterans' lives, that have tougher sentencing laws for domestic abuse victims, that are law today. I'm in my 2nd term on the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors, and I can tell you, thank you, county supervisors, for what you do, because we had a board that was dominated by decades-long control from Democrats, and we turned that board around. We've had $2.4 billion of economic development the last 6 years, and we're dedicating half of that, at least half of that, to property taxes. So I get this question all the time. So why are you in the race in a Republican-held district? And I'll tell you why. I have long respected, and I want to honor and respect the service of Congressman King, and I think that needs to be said from the start. At the same time, on election night in Woodbury County, I had 19,000 votes. I won with 56%. We lost the congressional seat in Woodbury County with about 45% or 15,000. I was in Webster County last night, same thing, we lost. I was in Boone, where Governor Reynolds won by 328. We lost a congressional seat by 1,003. And here's where my heart's passion is. We cannot cede this seat if we're going to take back the United States House of Representatives, and we have to take back the House of Representatives. Do you agree with me on that? Because here's the reality. If you don't take back the House from the likes of Nancy Pelosi, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Ilhan Omar, I don't believe our children and our children's children are going to recognize the country that we inherited from our parents' parents, and our founding fathers. So you have someone in me who will not just be a go-along to get along Republican, who won't go on CNN and attack Congressman King to raise money from the liberal left. You have in me a fighter. And I'm going to fight on issues like balancing the budget. It's been a problem for both parties, and it's high time we had somebody who fought. Someone who will defend the sanctity of human life. I appreciated Brett Richards mentioning that, and I will tell you this. I stood up to my own caucus when I was in the Iowa House. We were a 60-seat majority, and they said, you have to pass the HHS budget. And I said, I'm not going to vote for that. And the question was, why not? And I said, because there's taxpayer funding for abortion. And the response, even by some Republicans, was, well, it's only 6. And my question back was, since when did we talk about life as only anything? You know, in my family, I have 5 nieces and nephews who are adopted. And on my wife's side, we have 1. And I look at those 6, and I look at the lives that they are transforming others' lives, and that they are salt and light, and I think they're not only anything. They are God's creation. So I'm going to stand for the sanctity of life, preserve our Second Amendment rights, lower taxes, and support the president on slashing burdensome regulations. The Federal Registry has 90,000 pages under President Obama of unelected bureaucrats, and we talked about this a little earlier, that are making law and they're accountable to no one. That's fallen to 60,000, but we need to keep going. I want to reform healthcare, repeal Obamacare, secure our borders, reignite our ag economy, and stand for our veterans. It is not enough to elect just another Republican. Why? Because what happened when Republicans were in control?
They did nothing.
And I hear the rejoinder at every county meeting I met, and that's a whole lot of nothing. They couldn't cut $1 billion on a $4.75 trillion budget. They failed to stand for the sanctity of life, and they failed to secure our borders when they had the opportunity. And as someone whose family has gone through the legal immigration process, I'm here to tell you that there's a reason that we have secure borders. So this night is about our families. It's about our way forward as conservatives. You can check out our website at jeremytaylorforcongress.com. But I want to tell you this. My heart's passion is to leave our children in a better place than that which we inherited. We have a $22 trillion national debt. $364 billion a year is spent on interest. And our republic cannot endure a $7.2 trillion new green disaster that encroaches on every area of our lives. Can I just tell you this? My wife and I know where the United States House of Representatives is headed, because they've promised socialism. And when President Trump says we will never be a socialist country, we have members of Congress that don't know whether to stand and applaud or sit in cold and stare in silence. But my wife, Kim, lived through it. In 1975, when the Communist North took over, what was the first act? Was to disarm her father. The second act is in 1978 to take him to re-education. That's where he died in 1986. My children visited their grandfather's grave last year to meet him for the first time. Last month I was in Romania with the Iowa Army National Guard. I met my fellow faith leaders. I met the Greek Catholic priests, and they showed me 6 pictures in the back. And I didn't need to know Romanian to know that the word martyr meant that all 6 of those Catholic priests had been put to death under the communists. Chuck Larson right now is in Lithuania. Christians at night would plant the crosses, and in the day, the Soviet tanks would bulldoze them. At night, they'd plant the crosses again. And that's why our founders knew that we had to have a limited government because of the fallenness of the human heart. See, I don't believe that the answers lie in greater government, I believe they lie in God and our families and what we're doing here tonight. And I'm committed to doing so in Congress because I believe America is exceptional. And I'll close with this. I was on a train in Vietnam last year, and a man showed me his tattooed arm. He'd been in the same prison camp as my father-in-law. And he said this, America is very good. Because I used to listen to Ronald Reagan on a radio in secret, and it gave me hope that somehow, some way, we could have that freedom someday too. It has to be fought for. It has to be preserved. And Ronald Reagan said it takes but a generation to lose. And someday we'll talk to our children and our children's children, and we'll say there was once a time in which we were once free. Well, I hope that 30, 40 years from now, our grandchildren look us in the eye and they say, in 2019, it was a dark time, wasn't it? And say, yes, there was out of control spending. Yes, there was a disrespect for the sanctity of human life. Yes, we had people who were advocating socialism and open borders. But you know what? We regained that which we inherited. We stood in the gap. We were called to serve, and we stood for such a time as this. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I hope to earn your support. You'll see me again and again, and I thank you for what you do. Thank you very much.